name is Heeney, and we're going to teach you how to restring a waterski or a barefoot handle or any of the waterski handles. I'm going to show an assortment of tools. The tools are all relatively inexpensive. I usually have a lighter, you know, for lighting like gas grills, that kind of stuff, for searing the ends of the rope. We've got rope, we've got an old handle that we're going to restring with new rope, and we're going to actually change it a little bit. I have a couple of fids. These are fids. Actually, they're relatively inexpensive to buy. They come in an assortment of sizes. For example, this is a number 10 knitting needle, and we cut it off at a 45-degree angle, and they make beautiful fids. The reason the aluminum is so beautiful is, versus plastic, is these are very skinny, and they're much easier to work with than, say, the plastic fids you can buy commercially, and they're cheaper. They work much better. So I have an assortment for up to 5/16 quarter-inch rope, and for all that new Kevlar poly rope, I have the itty-bitty ones, and I think this is like a number 6. I can't remember. You'll have to figure that out when you go to the knitting store. Usually keep a little black tape around here. We use that sometimes when we need to wrap the end of the floats so that they don't tear. There's actually a way we prevent these from tearing. You know, when they get dragged behind a boat over time, they tend to tear up. Use a little black tape, electrical tape. Sometimes you need a pencil. The last thing I have is a pair of pliers. These are actually glass pliers. They're a little smaller and they're a little skinnier, but any pair of pliers usually will work sometimes for taking them apart. You'll notice if we look at the handle, if you see cracks in here, we need to go buy new end caps. If you see cracks around here, you need to go buy new end caps. Otherwise, we're going to recycle these caps right here, and the art is to get them off without tearing them. So what we're going to do first is heat them up in warm water. What we're going to do, get a pair of pliers under here and start prying it off. And you can see why you want to make sure it's warm, because if it's not, you end up tearing the end cap off. Okay, looks good. I'm going to salvage those end caps. I'm going to cut all the old rope off. And usually I have a knife laying around here, and we're going to just cut the rope off and get rid of it. We're going to pull the tubing off, and we'll save the tubing and recycle that. We'll make another cut right here where we did a splice. Save that tubing. You got to cut it right here, or you'll never get those off. You'll see I've taken one piece off here. I leave it all together. We're going to reuse that tubing. That's fine. If you need to replace that tubing, there's a number of sources. For example, Leuck Sports can supply it to you. Actually, we've used a clear number of PEX pipes used in housing construction. There are some that are stiff enough to use. So we're going to pull this all off. You'll notice I just cut the old rope off. And I'll pull this other end off. So, you get the handle, you get a core. This is a handle, it's an aluminum handle inside with the rubber on the outside. And we're going to cut this off. And when you cut this off, you have to be careful, because you do not want to really cut the rubber any more than you have to. When you're taking a handle apart is, you get a handle that oftentimes is glazed. It's glazed for two reasons. One is people have had gloves on them that kind of take the finish away, and they get slippery. The other thing that causes them to get slippery is everybody that out in the boat with their suntan oil, and they slobber it all over themselves, and then they slobber it all over the handle too, and it fills all the pores in the rubber. So one of the things we can do is to take that glazing off. So I built a little bit of a jig here. It's basically a piece of wood with, I drill a hole through the middle, and then I cut it in half, and it's the diameter of the handle. So if you have different size handles, as they do come in different sizes, you might drill different size holes. And then we're going to put it in a vise. Open my vise up here, put the handle in, and I'll do half a handle at a time. So I'm going to put it in the vise, grab it like this, and you'll see the little slit. Put it in there, and going to put it in there, and that is going to hold it. Put it in there nice and tight. We're going to use a little bit of emery paper. I usually use somewhere between 50 and 80 grit. I have 80 here, but 50 actually takes it off a little quicker and makes the job a little faster. We're going to take about an 18-inch chunk, and all we're going to do is grab it and take that and sand that rough finish off. And you can see you work up and you work around it like this, and it's going to give that nice new feel that you get on a new handle, because you're taking that glazing off and it's just back to the original rubber. How to string the handle. Anybody can hack something apart, but the art is putting it together, and putting it together straight. We use 5/16 rope typically to build a handle. 5/16 poly rope. I still say the best place to buy this, Lake Elmo Sports. We went down to our local hardware store to pick up this stuff. The beauty of the nicer ropes is they'll last a lot longer, and they tend not to be so stretchy. When you go to your hardware store, you get a lesser quality, but it works. You'll notice that the rope has been seared on the end, so at the hardware store when they cut it off, I'm actually going to cut that off, because what happens when you have a fat sear like this at the end, that's actually where the searing will cut the other rope when you create a fid. You want a nice smooth end on a rope, and this one's got burrs hanging off it. So now that I've cut the end off and we have a fresh end, I'm going to measure 5 feet, and I'm going to make a 5-foot chunk, and I'm going to make about a 12-foot chunk. So here's my 5-foot chunk. I'm going to cut that off. We use a very precise technique here. And then a 12-foot is about 2 of these, because I have about a 6-foot reach. And I'm going to cut it off, throw my extra piece away. So the first thing you're going to do is grab a number 10 knitting needle, and we're going to feed the rope inside. Number 10 needle needing. I'm going to slide it all the way up in there. Then I'm going to turn it back on itself, the length of the needle. And I'm going to just slip it right inside the other one. And I'm going to make a loop on the end this way. That is basically going to be the diameter of the handle right there. I'm just going to put it in right now, and I'm going to do the other one very quickly here. Turn it back on itself, feed it through, make a loop the diameter of the handle on the end. Doesn't have to be exact, but that's just a rough idea. You'll see how we use this later on. If it's too small, you can always make it bigger, easy enough. There you go. Now that we got that done, the next thing I'm going to do is take this rope. This is the 5-foot section I made, and I am going to pass it through the handle. Like this. The next thing I'm going to do is get the diameter about the size of the diameter, or just a whisker bigger. I'm going to take the fid, and I'm going to pass it through here like so. Put it back inside, shove it through, pull it out. Now what's going to happen is the rope is going to make a natural loop for itself. And we're going to make this loop a little bigger. Pass it through like so. Remember, I passed it through the rope. Now I got the loop. I'm going to pull the loop over the end, like so. And we're going to slide it on the end just like that. Now here's one of the tricks. You have to pull this very tight, because if you don't pull it tight, later on when you ski on it, it's going to pull tight, and then you're going to have a crooked handle. So you always have to pull all the knots very tight. So usually what I'll do is set it on the ground, and I'll pull on it nice and tight. Now it's not going anywhere. Now we're going to reverse it. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. And the one thing you need to make sure is that when we feed this rope through, we feed it through the same direction. So I'm going to feed the rope down through here, down through the hole. This is the 12-foot section. Going to go over the end just like this. But I got to pass the rope through it. So now I'm going to grab the fid here on the 12-foot rope. It's going to go over the end like this. Going to feed it down through it. So we have a little on each side. Going to pass it like this. Beautiful! See the difference?
Yeah.
Now remember, what do I always want to focus on? Making sure the knot is nice and tight. Now, remember me talking about how you sear the ends? They come with a seared end. Now if you run your hand over here, it's nice and smooth. You don't feel a knot or a bump in there. Otherwise, over time, that's one of the places a rope will break, because it cuts itself. We were just talking about having a seared end. I am going to sear it just a little bit. And usually what I'll use is a paper towel, and we will just heat this up. And so I don't burn myself, because this dude is going to be hot, I'll just grab a towel and I'll pull it to a nice point. And what you don't want is you don't want anything hanging out that's going to catch. Trying to show you all those little tips that make it easier. But eventually I'm going to cut that off. But for now, we're going to feed it down through the tubing. So now you've seen me. I've threaded the rope through the end cap. I've threaded through the tubing. We're going to put it back together. We're going to grab the end cap. And we're just going to force it over the end cap end here. Now, sometimes this gets a little difficult. If it does, we can grab it with pliers. And the other thing we can use is the silicone that you use on dry suits. Notice, I got the end cap on. I'm going to put both end caps on at the same time. And one of the things you want to focus on when you put the end cap on is that it's straight in line with the hole. You know, it's easy to do one of these and have it pull in it. Guess what happens when you build the handle and it's crooked? Then when it finally pulls straight, you got a crooked handle again. So making sure that you know which way that it is, so it's all nice and tight. I'm going to put the other end cap on. We've got the end caps on. We're ready to put the tubing on. So tubing, all we're going to do is slip the rope right down through the middle of the tubing. This tubing is pretty big in diameter, so the rope readily slides in it somewhere. I used to have that. It probably is. It's not that baggy. Oh, dude, look at that water. So the next thing we're going to do is we're installing the tubing. When you put the tubing on, we're going to pull the rope through, and you need to pull it so it is very tight up against the handle. It's just another place that if you don't get it tight, you build a handle, later on, when it does come tight, it's going to be a crooked handle again. So we pull both tubings up nice and tight. You heard that one going a little farther on. And if it looks like a horseshoe instead of a V, that's okay at this point in time. Better that way than the reverse. All right, now we're going to install the toe strap. Again, just passing it through the first hole, and we're going to put an end cap on. These little white end caps. They also can be bought separately. Push it through, put the end cap on. You know, so now I've got the stiffeners on. I've passed the rope up through the stiffener. I've passed the rope up through the toe strap. And we're going to build an open toe this time. What I do is I put a fid on both ropes. Why? It just makes the process a lot faster than having to change it all the time. Now I'm going to pass one of the fids through the toe strap like that. I'm going to set it down and pass the other one through. And do this simultaneously so that the handle is built straight and even. A straight handle, there's nothing more annoying than a crooked handle. So now you're going to see I have the rope pass through there. The next thing I'm going to do is take this short rope and I'm going to make sure I pull it nice and tight, and I'm going to reach back in here. Can you see me reaching back in here? And I'm actually going to pull it a little bit tight, and I'm going to feed it right back through the middle and back through the hole. And then I'm going to pull it out. So remember, we pull it nice and tight. I come back and I reach down into the tubing just a little bit, and I split the rope, and I go right through the rope with the one rope, and I'm going to pull it right back through. Again, this is another critical one where that has to be tight or you'll end up with a crooked handle. All right, right there we got it thread through. The next thing we're going to do is put our plastic liner up to here and make a V so that it stays open. And then after that, we're going to teach you how to weave, create a weave between the two ropes into one rope. Now we have a handle that's ready to start the weave, where we're going to weave these two ropes together. So the one point I want to make, I keep stressing making a straight handle. There's nothing worse than skiing with a crooked handle. See, if I don't weave them correctly, you can see how you'll have it shorter on one side than the other. So the art here is figuring out where to weave it and how to weave it. So I usually set it on the ground like this and stand on it. Make sure both sides are nice and tight. And then I will start the weaving process. So the first thing I'm going to do is take one of the fids, and I'm going to grab the short one this time, and I'm going to pass it, make it snug but not too snug. I'm just going to pass it right through the center of this one. That defines the length of one rope already. Now the length of the other rope is going to be defined by the second weave. So now we got it nice and straight like this. So now I see I need to weave this. I went with my right hand rope. Now I'm going to take my right hand rope and do it again. But you alternate it. Each time you go with the other rope. That's why I put two fids on, one on each end. So now I'm going to feed the second run through. And this is going to be the one that really determines that they're the same length. If they're not, then we're going to come back and unweave it and adjust it. But here's where all the money is, guys. That knot right there you just made. And you can see how there's some play in it. That's okay, because as we weave it more and more, that play will all disappear. So I'm going to ask my compatriot here, Jay, to grab the handle and close his eyes. So what do you think, Jay? Rotate the handle. Now flip it over. Grab it hand for end. Okay, grab it end for end again. Now, does one side seem longer? Seem nice and straight? Yeah. The best way to do this is somebody holding the rope and the other guy grabs the handle and feel it. Because if you're a quarter of an inch off or an eighth of an inch off, it'll drive me crazy. All right, feel good, Jay? So now the next thing I'm going to do is finish the weave, and I'm going to weave it 4 times in and out, and that's going to make a permanent deal. Finishing up the 7th of the weaves actually creates a weave of 4 times. And you notice how I'll jiggle it back and forth so that the rope lays nice and neat. Now I'm going to do the last one, but the last one's a little different. I'm not going to pass it all the way through. I am going to pass it up through the middle. And I'm going to pass it about 6 or 8 inches. It doesn't have to be all the way. I'm going to pass it all the way through, and I'm going to pull it out this end. Now you have a nice uniform weave, and I've got a little bit left over. We'll cut that off. And when I feed the float and the last piece over, it'll just be buried inside here. You don't have to come all the way up. It doesn't matter because all the load's being carried by one rope anyway. Show it on a bench. You know, it's pretty dang close. We couldn't see one longer than the other. Now I'm going to cut the extra off right here after I've checked it. You have a nice even braid. This braid is really cool looking when it's in colors, if you use 2 different color ropes, if you do it right. Now the next thing we're going to do is feed it back through my float, pass it right up through the hole, put my end cap on. This one's got the float from before already on it. I'm going to put that dude on there. I'll put this on. There's your handle, all your floats. Now all we're going to do next is put a loop on it. The floats, every handle should have a float so that the boat driver doesn't have to deal with finding the float in his propeller. And one of the things that we do, if you want, you can put the floats right here. I like them up here on the toe strap area, up past the toe strap. Why? My foot ends up on that every time I do a front deep, and it's very comfortable. But when the water hits this at about 45 miles an hour, it tends to tear these floats. You can already see this one's got a few cracks in it. I'm going to show you how you prevent that from tearing, and they last forever. It's just simply by taking a little bit of electrical tape, and you can use black electrical tape. I like to use red just because it's a little different, but I'm going to use black today. And you just put it around here with a little bit of tension and stretch the tape just a little. And I'll go around the unit about 3 times on both ends, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch from the end. Knife. Snip that off. Just lay it down. I'm going to do the same on the other end. Beautiful. Now we're going to get ready to put the loop on the end of the rope. The loop at the end of the rope has to be long enough go over the top of the handle comfortably. It's usually about a 15-inch loop. The other thing is, if you're building a slalom handle for slalom, there are specific lengths at which the handle needs to be. In tricks and barefooting, the handle can be any length. If you want it the standard length, it's about 5 feet, and you can make the loop, adjust the loop size to make it any length you want. So we're going to work on the last loop, and this also is a critical place. So what you're going to do is you take the loop that's here, and we can pass it through the center. And we'll pass it through, and then it's held at a specific site. This is going to determine the size of the loop that goes over the handle. We're getting ready to make the loop here. We're going to come around, and all you do is you come all the way around the rope, and you tie an overhand knot, like so. And you're going to see it's just a simple overhand knot I've basically tied. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this rope all the way through this, and we're going to make it double thickness out here. What I'm going to do is put my knot tight, which is all the way around, and then at a location that's relatively easy to find, I'm going to take the fit and I'm going to feed it in here. And here's how you make it feed back all the way around itself. You can feed it in for a while. And one of the classic mistakes is people end up feeding it too far in and try to bite off too much to chew, and then they end up losing the end. So I'm going to pass it in, and then I'm going to pass it back out, and I'm going to pull it all out. Okay? So now you can see I'm starting to build the loop. Then I'm going to go right back in the same hole, and I'm going to do the same thing, go about 1/2 or 1/3 of the way around. Now when I get back to the knot, I'm back where I started. I'm going to poke it out, and I'll pull it all out. Pull it now, I got a little small knot, don't I? But as I stretch it back out, it's going to grow back into about a 15-inch loop. It's a little bit smaller than what we started with, but now it's double thickness. Nice thing about the double thickness ropes is the outside rope kind of helps protect the inside rope, so you do have a little bit more strength. Everybody thinks, especially when you're working with the skinny lines that are tougher than the old polypropylene. The one thing I will tell you, it doesn't add a lot to the length of the rope length, because you have the same vulnerability when you're down here where it's single thickness anyway. But at the end, there's your first rope, and I'd like to thank Willie Farrell for teaching me how to do this 25 years ago.